I think just to start and say, I found today really, really interesting actually, and I think a lot of the presentations build on each other, and hopefully this one will do the same again. So I'm here to talk about improving safety and efficiency in operation via wikis. And the first thing that when people think about wikis is they think about Wikipedia. Okay, so where does my interest in this come from? So I was an engineer manager on Monomer and Sara, one of the top tier coma sites down in Billingham. And this was 20 years ago, and the guys were absolutely fantastic, really, really great team of guys. But I had a real frustration that too much knowledge was in people's heads and that we weren't able to get to that knowledge. And I tried various things and various spreadsheets and then Lotus Notes and one thing and another as an amateur. And eventually got to 2000 where we thought, do you know what, we need to do business here, and started the business FoCul, and what we're all about is sort of collaboration and knowledge management. And as an engineer, if somebody had said to me, yeah, absolutely, you can have a wiki page for each of your assets, and wouldn't that be great? And like, now Wikipedia didn't come along until 2001, we started in 2000. 1994 actually, ABB Engineering Technology was doing a load of stuff like this in Lotus Notes. But if somebody had said to me, oh, you know, that's what you can do, I would have thought, oh, that's brilliant, that's exactly what I want. And you know, these are some of the strengths of a wiki approach. Now, a wiki approach is just a subset of a knowledge management approach. So if we talk about knowledge management, so it's a very, very rich knowledge base. It's easy to use. It's relatively simple to add information. And there's lots and lots of different software that could do this really basic wiki approach. Like most of you will have SharePoint, or Ineos might have Alfresco, or MediaWiki, which is what Wikipedia is based on. It's free. You can get it for free. You can run it on your own site. There's no cost to that. So you look at all these things and you sort of think, why are we not seeing more of these wikis inside our own workplaces? And the reason for that comes when you start to look at it more carefully. So if you actually go on the same Wikipedia page, you can straight away see there's a warning about be careful in how you trust this information. Okay? And if we then go on to look at the weaknesses of wikis, you get things like this. So the first one is, and it's a real shame, is that knowledge management isn't trendy anymore. Everybody talks about machine learning or artificial intelligence and things like that, and knowledge management has sort of lost its buzz. The next bit is it's really labor intensive. If you try and think about having that wiki page and your team putting in information onto that, that's an awful lot of work. And the reality is that people do not go and create knowledge for the sake of it. They might create knowledge as part of doing some task, but they don't go off and just do it for the sake of it. We'll talk more about that later on. It's not authoritative either. So if you look at a wiki page, how do you know that the torques, like we just talked about torquing flanges and stuff, if you see some torques on a wiki page, how do you know that those torques are right? You don't. It's too unstructured. So if you present a blank page to people, you know, even to managers, and you say, here, go away and write a case study on something, the sort of sometimes it's very intimidating. But if you say that to your fitter population, it's even more intimidating. And a wiki is just too blank, really. It's too editable. People can go in and change things. Not everybody sees sharing as good. It's less of an issue than it used to be. And I think the sort of the Facebook generation has helped in that people see that sharing is good. Not everybody, but more people. Another problem is that Google is too good. So it's too easy to go and Google the wiki page on centrifugal pumps. Why bother writing one yourself? But really that's superficial. Once you get into the detail, you find it's not there for your particular pumps. And we don't incorporate knowledge derived from data. So the last presentation was very much about data, and data is really important because data leads to knowledge. But wikis, traditionally, you've had wikis which are about rich words and pictures, and you've had data, and there hasn't really been a merging of the two things, which is a weakness. So that's why the wikis aren't really working. And what I want to do next is to talk about 3 case studies from NEPIC members that where a wiki type approach has worked really, really well. A little bit of background to me. So I was this engineer manager that was really, really frustrated with not having the knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And I did lots of spreadsheets and then eventually did stuff in Lotus Notes as an amateur and all that kind of thing. So back in 2000, I went and started a business, and so these are customers of that business. So if I talk about each of them and work our way through them. So this is the management of change for process safety. So this is used by Seqens or Comoxie as they used to be called. The same system is used on 9 sites by PX and 7 sites by Greenergy, who are all NEPIC members. And it's a stage gate process where you need collaboration across different functions. And MOC is really nice this way. To do a good management of change assessment, you have to involve lots of different people and they have to put effort into it. So it's a really good candidate for how you might use a wiki system. It needs to encourage lots of really rich input. So it actually has to be quite flexible as well as being quite prescriptive. And if we have a look at how this system actually works. So this is the dashboard when you first go into it, and you can see the metrics are very important. So we have a chart of how many MOCs are open at any given time. So for Seqens, this is that they can comfortably manage about 100. And that in itself is quite a challenge really, because if you think about an MOC process, and let's just use some round numbers, imagine it has 5 stage gates, and imagine each stage gate has 5 signatures, and imagine each MOC has 10 actions, and then imagine people have to say, yes, I've read and understood that MOC, like the operations team. I think we're somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 signatures there already for a year's worth of MOCs, which is just a huge challenge for any business really. Whereas if you can begin to break that down, and if you were to look, it's just off the bottom of the slide here, but they've got a Pareto chart of who's got what to do, and if you click on those charts, it would open up and say, these are the actions with this person, and you can begin to manage your bottlenecks. So it's this combination of knowledge and data coming together. So if we go and look at an MOC, so this is the front page of an MOC. It's very, very simple. We can see I've got a structured form, again, because people don't like blank things. We work our way through that. We can see the bit at the bottom is quite interesting. This is a list of people who at some point will need to say, yes, I have read and understood that MOC because it impacts on me. And it creates individual trackable actions for those people. Across the top, you can see the tabs which sort of follow the stage gate process. So they will have looked at this system and they will have said, what type of MOC is it? And that will then have dictated that certain assessments have to be done. So here we have these 11 different assessments need to be done. And if I click in on that one that's highlighted there, this is what that form would then look at. So this is, if you think back to Wikipedia and that page, this is an opportunity for an expert in that field to put in their knowledge and share it with their colleagues. They've got a bit of structure there to keep them going in the right direction, but they can also add to it, and they can add photographs and other reports and things like that. One other thing that's really important about it is it's a stage gate process. So one of the big problems with a wiki approach is it's too open. And if you're involved in endorsing an MOC, what you don't want is a person changing what you've written, because that's just going to lead to all sorts of problems. So when the person gets down and finishes this assessment, that then gets locked off, and they've been able to share that information, but it's safe and everybody knows, yes, what I've put my name to is what was there on that day. So we've got very, very lucky in this sense in that the benefits of sharing knowledge are implicit in an MOC. A management of change assessment is all about, let's get our collective knowledge together and let's understand where we can go wrong. It's authoritative because every single piece of knowledge in that assessment has been authorized and endorsed. That's the way MOC works. It's both structured and flexible, which is a theme we'll come to a bit more. It's a stage gate process, so things are protected from edits. Once you sign them off, nobody's going to go in and change them. And it definitely improves safety and efficiency. Think of the number of signatures that have to be done, but the safety bit obviously is very well and catered for and is implicit in the whole MOC process. So if we look at the next case study, so I've got 3 of these in total, so we're rattling through at some speed here. I get very enthusiastic about these because I'm really proud of what the customers have done, and it's excellent. But I get a bit too excitable. So the next one is Asset Wiki. So this is a bit closer to that first wiki page that we talked about. So again, the way I try and explain this to people is, imagine you had a wiki page for every pump or condenser or vessel or whatever on your plant. And imagine on that wiki page was all of the knowledge that you had. And this is something that's quite close to that. So we've got a wiki page for each asset. The data, some of the data is automatically pulled in from other sources. So we're going to look at the wiki page for boiler, and we'll see the defects and the work orders, and those have been pulled in from different places. The data is aggregated and summarized. So I talked earlier on about the importance of not just knowledge, but data. And if you take the data that you've got, you can begin to aggregate that, and you'll see some useful charts come out of that. Knowledge is added by key users. So again, it's something I'll talk a bit more about, but again, you don't want people going in willy-nilly changing things. So for instance, if we come back to the previous example of the torquing of flanges and stuff, if you had a wiki page for a vessel, you would want to make sure that the people that could change those torque settings were restricted. So you want the information to be there and to be accessible, but you want it to be controlled at the same time. And the tagging of records, again, if you can tag records in the right way, so imagine you're doing failure investigations and you tag this one as this was related to a bearing failure, then because it's all in a database, you can turn that around and say, let's see how many bearing failures we have had this month, this quarter, or whatever. So this is Greenergy, and it's the application there in the circle. Greenergy have been fantastic. They've really taken on board this whole wiki idea. So on there we have management of change, which is essentially a wiki. We have operations wiki, which is like shift logs and all that kind of stuff. We have asset wiki. We have logistics wiki, which is about tanker movements between sites and all that kind of stuff. So they've really, really taken this on board, which is excellent. And this is the record for a low pressure boiler on the site. So the things to take away from this, the first thing is the chart across the top, and that's what we call the, I knew this was going to happen, I've forgotten what I called it now, it'll come back to me. It's called the pulse chart. So it's about information being added to our knowledge about that piece of equipment. And each bar on that chart will either be, it'll be a defect, or it'll be a work order, or it'll be a root cause investigation, or something similar to that. So that shows you how our knowledge is being added over time. You can see on the left-hand side where I can go and I can create a new record. So some of those records are automatically pulled in from all the systems. Some of them are added by hand. And the drop-down list there shows you what some of those records were. So again, just going back to presentations, we talked about there was a record there of flanges and torques and things like that, and that was a spreadsheet. And part of this, and the chap did say, you know, we're going to take this to something new in the future. So there's an awful lot of things that are done by spreadsheets on sites, and like a really good example of that is a criticality study. If you're going to go and do a criticality study of your assets, to be honest, if you're going to do it on a form point of view where you have a form and lots of fields on it, it becomes too big a task because you've got to maybe crunch through 1,000 pieces of equipment the first time you do your criticality study. Whereas what you can do it on a spreadsheet, and then you can send that spreadsheet to this system, and each row in the spreadsheet becomes a form, and therefore when something changes that affects the criticality of that piece of equipment, you update the record and you've got the full auditable history of it, and it's a good way of working. So by creating these forms, which we can do in like sort of a drag and drop type form builder approach, we can create forms quite quickly. Another lovely example, going back quite a few years to a Lotus Notes version of this, I had some electricians came to me and they had a real frustration about, they thought that the interchangeability of motors on the site was much better than we understood, and they had realized that a motor off a pump on a safety shower would actually fit a motor on a process pump on a different part of the site. So they asked me, would you set up a form called a motor data sheet, and every time we work on a motor, we'll fill out the motor data sheet. And they did that, and after 2 years, there was a fantastic map that showed what all motors by frame size were interchangeable with other motors. And if you can get that knowledge out of the workforce, and that was a really good example of where the electricians wanted to do this because it solved a problem that they had, then you know this is a good tool for doing that. The other thing to mention here is the tagging on the right-hand side. If we tag equipment in the right way, so for instance, if we say, oh, this is a production critical or safety critical, then you can apply a lot of rules to that. So for instance, the people that can change the maintenance schedule for non-critical equipment is quite wide, but for safety critical equipment, if somebody's going to change the interval of the maintenance, only a certain population can do that. So by tagging stuff, you can find it much quicker, but you can also restrict who can change it, which is an important part of wikis, really. The last bit, the photograph on the top is really good. So they've made a fantastic effort on this site, and on the Amsterdam site they're just commissioning a minute. They've gone round and photographed each piece of equipment. And that's great because if you're doing, like a permit to work issue would always need to visit the workplace, but in those initial conversations about, oh, somebody's coming to do this job and how are they going to do it, or we're going to modify something, to have a very easily accessible photograph is worth its weight in gold. And the way this system works, if you have a photograph in a root cause investigation, you can actually see that up at this level, so you can see the photographs independent of having to drill into the documents, which works really well. Because we've got data about defects and work orders, we can create these Pareto charts. So we had a customer down Bradford direction. and they had a SAP team. They did everything in SAP. All the maintenance was in SAP. And what used to happen was 2 weeks after month end, the SAP team would give them a Pareto chart of this is where you've spent your money or the number of work orders on your plant in the last month. And the problem was it was a flat chart. And people say, well, I don't understand why we spent so much there. Have we miscategorized something? But they couldn't actually click in on the chart to see that information. Whereas what we've done is on a Monday morning, the SAP coordinator would just email standard SAP reports to this application, and then 10 minutes later, these charts were available. And if you double clicked on one of those bars, it would actually take you to the list of work orders that compose the data underneath that bar. So we've taken SAP data, and then with a very, very simple, just based somebody emailing a report to the system, we've then made that information much, much more accessible to the team, and done in a very, very simple way that doesn't involve IT teams and all that kind of stuff. But again, it's a really good example of where the data in the previous presentation is really important, because data helps you to produce knowledge, and the knowledge is the thing that moves us forward. So what we've got here is something that's both structured and flexible. It's authoritative where it needs to be. So if it's something about, this one example doesn't do it, but the torque wrench example, if it was the torque settings on a vessel, we can lock that bit down, and therefore that becomes authoritative because only certain people can change it. The key data is protected from edits. So again, that kind of similar kind of thing. It incorporates metrics and knowledge. So again, this highlighted the Pareto chart of where are my bad actors, where have I spent all my money, that's flowing out of it as well. Again, improve safety, efficiency by making the knowledge more accessible. And the important bit to take away, that tagging is really important. As well, this is an interesting one because the data is becoming quite broad really, and what you do need to think about when a system is successful is the ownership of the data in terms of like almost a housekeeping. Somebody needs to be there setting the standards. It's no good if everybody just brain dumps into it. Somebody has to own it and has to actually say, no, we're going to structure it in such and such a way, and these are the best practices that we can use to do that. So that's very, very important. Right, so I'm on to the last case study now. Still rattling at some speed here. My clock says I've been on 5 minutes, but I think it's stopped. Yeah, I need to keep moving. Keep moving. Right, so this last one is something we call Operations Wiki. That's actually the same software as Asset Wiki that you just saw, but it's configured in a different way, but it's actually the same software. And this one, it's not quite as graphics heavy, this one, just because it's difficult to show a real case study, but hopefully you'll get the idea from it. So what we have is a series of structured wiki pages per team. So you can imagine, this is from the Lotte site down at Wilton. So you have an FLM log, and then you have 3 plant logs, and then you have a load of operators underneath that. So you've got a structure there. It's about how we reduce the double handling of information, how data is automatically pulled in from other sources. Data is aggregated and summarized in the same way that you would have seen with the maintenance defects and stuff from the last example. And this one is a really good example of the hierarchy of authoritative views. That whole idea about, well, a wiki is no good if everybody just chips in. Just as an example, if you go and look at the wiki page for Brexit, so the wiki page for that centrifugal pump has changed 1,000 times in 16 years. The wiki page for Brexit has changed 1,000 times in 60 days. And you can see how there's a real struggle with authoritative views going on there. So if we look at this, so we've got our operators down on the plant. Everybody's encouraged to feed into the system, so some of that information goes into the plant logs, like for instance the LC1 log, and then some of that goes up to the FLM log as well. And the way that we do this is very simple. We have a very simple form, so this is an example from a computer. There is the potential to use a very similar form on a mobile device. They don't have mobile devices at the minute, but when they do, we'll be ready for that. And somebody can put in their comments there and can add that to the log, and you can get the whole team are busy putting their comments in. And then if we look at this, so this is the LC1 log, you can see how that particular comment has found its way onto the log on the observations tab. The other 2 tabs are much more structured than what you would expect to find in a shift log. And then if we think about, well, actually, we have the FLM log above this. So again, we have this hierarchy of authoritative views, and that same information has found its way onto the FLM log, the first time managers log. And so what happens there is that they're able to cherry pick observations from the rest of the team and go bang, pull those into my FLM report, and therefore we're reducing the double handling. And you're getting much more contribution from the whole team. Again, a wiki, the whole idea of a wiki is it's something that a community contributes into, and the word wiki means fast in Hawaiian apparently. So the whole idea is that you can quickly chip in as a community to increase the knowledge of what all's happening at the time. So again, it's both structured and flexible. Knowledge is captured as part of, so this is really important. People, as I said earlier, will not add knowledge for the sake of adding knowledge. We're very lucky in the process industry in that it's quite a compliance-driven industry, and therefore people understand that they need to add information about the tasks they're doing to various logs or reports or whatever. So if you can capture that process and use that information as part of your wiki, then that works really, really well. Double handling is reduced. The hierarchy of authoritative reviews is really important because your operators are putting in the raw information, but the FLM at the top actually can see how different areas are impacting and he can see he has a much richer knowledge about what's happening. But at the same time, the knowledge of the individuals down on the shifts is really important, and we need not to lose that. Key data is protected from edits, and again, we're improving safety and efficiency. So 2 more slides. So in terms of learning from using a wiki approach, you need both flexibility and structure. If you give people something too simple and too blank, it's just too intimidating. So it needs to be both flexible and structured. Capturing knowledge needs to become a natural byproduct of doing tasks. And again, we had an interesting observation recently where somebody from the water industry complimented how well the process industry was capturing knowledge. And part of that, I think, was because much more compliance driven, really. It's important to separate observations and opinions from authoritative knowledge. So you can imagine somebody putting in information about torque settings and stuff, how their opinions might be interesting, but that's unuseful, but that needs to be kept separate from the authoritative bit that says these are the torque settings that you must use on this flange. And that difference and distinction is quite important. Incorporating knowledge derived from data and analytics, again, everybody's in machine learning and all this kind of, it is absolutely part of the future, and what we need to do is to pull that data together with the knowledge stuff that we have, and the two do inform each other. So that whole idea of just being able to do a simple Pareto chart of the number of work orders or defects by equipment, it actually informs your knowledge and helps you to understand where your effort is going, and that is knowledge at the end of the day. And the last message on this I would say is, start gradually, but you need to have a strong vision. So it'd be very easy to go out and get SharePoint and say, oh, we're going to use SharePoint and we're going to do this. And there's absolutely some merit in that. But if you take an example such as tagging, if you're going to do failure reports or root cause investigations, you need to think about how we tag these investigations so that further down the line, we can start doing some pivot charts that say these were failures by, bearing failure or operator training or whatever else. So you just need to have that vision as you think ahead. And then the last slide, this is the operations wiki, so the shift log from Greenergy Teesside. This is this thing's actually from 2017, and it's changed, it's got a bit richer since then, but this is still quite useful. So, actually I'm going to move away from the microphone here. So what we've got up in the top left, we've got on this dashboard is looking into the management of change system, which is one of the wiki systems. We're looking into trip defeats. Trip defeats is a really nice example because the operators raise trip defeats in what they think is the shift log operations wiki, but actually those records are actually been raised in asset wiki underneath that asset. So it turns it around so that not only is the shift able to work with the trip defeats and know what there is live, but the engineers are able then to go into a particular trip and say, oh, this is the history of defeats on this piece of equipment, which is quite good. We've got some metrics coming through about uptime. We've got the last 7 days SHE entries. This is from an entirely different third-party system. The kind of thing, it emails you the safety reports as they get raised. So we just intercept that email and push those into the wiki. We've got the ongoing maintenance. So this is the defects and work orders in the bottom corner. And we've got permits. So again, the permit system is actually a wiki system. But again, you can imagine on that one, we've dialed the flexibility right back to minimal, really, because you don't want too much flexibility in how you do your permits work and stuff like that. So while I've maybe given the impression that the wikis are very much about knowledge and words and pictures and stuff, actually, it does actually lend itself to nice clean dashboards and stuff like that as well. Okay, so sorry if I rattled through that really quickly, but you get the idea. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.